Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on understanding HIV and AIDS workplace laws, creating an inclusive and discrimination-free workplace. We are glad to have every one of you here to join for this webinar, where we will be exploring workplace compliance laws in HIV and AIDS. Myself, Ipsita Mishra, I'm a senior in-house counsel at Lawcubator. Over the next 1 hour, we'll share insights and also share certain practical advice on how to comply with the HIV and AIDS workplace laws. Before I begin, I would like to inform you all that you can use the chat box to ask your queries. This is more of an interactive webinar, and so feel free to discuss. With that said, let's get started. Thank you for joining us again, and let's dive in. So the objective and the agenda of this webinar it is divided into 3 parts basically. We'll try and understand what are the basic myths and facts regarding both HIV and AIDS, a basic awareness regarding what this virus is about or what this disease is about. We'll also try to see what are the different kind of discrimination that employees face at workplace. Also, we will try to understand the solutions provided. Basically, what the law states about that, what are few of the best practices, the roles of employer and employee, and also the role played by the co-workers, and few recommendations and best practices. Now that we have discussed the agenda and objective of this webinar, let us move to the next details basically. Yeah, so let me give you a very brief overview about the virus and the disease. Can any one of you tell me what's the exact difference between HIV and AIDS? You can use the chat box to respond. What is the exact difference between HIV and AIDS? Please feel free to use the chat box. It can be anything. Okay, Vishu says that the virus and the disease caused by it. Okay, any other response? So let me go ahead. In the next slide, we will try to understand what does HIV exactly mean. So, as the name suggests, it is human immunodeficiency virus. So exactly, it is a virus that affects the cells of the human bodies. It is basically, it can be managed by treatment, but there is no cure as of now. So it can be transmitted by bodily fluids and it can be managed. It is not curable, but it can be managed by ART therapy. So ART therapy is something, it is called antiretroviral therapy. Now let's discuss what exactly is AIDS. Next slide, please. So AIDS, again, as the name suggests, it is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So HIV is a virus, while AIDS is a disease that is caused that occurs when HIV has severely damaged the immune system. The human body and the immune system becomes very, very weak, and this is an advanced stage of HIV infection. And AIDS develops only after 8 to 12 years after the HIV infection is left untreated. So it is a life-threatening condition, and that is what the exact difference between HIV and AIDS is. AIDS is a disease, while HIV is the virus, and AIDS is a severe form of HIV. Now, let's move to the next slide. Let us see a basic few myths and facts regarding HIV basically. HIV can be transmitted via different forms. It can be via unprotected sex, by needles or syringes, or maybe, it can be perinatal, which is before childbirth and after childbirth, from mother to child transmission, basically, where the mother is basically breastfeeding the child, or it can be also via infected blood transfusion. There are certain myths that we have, like HIV is spread via contact, or maybe, air, or maybe like kissing or insects. So these all are myths. So we need to understand that HIV is not spread via casual contact, or if you're sharing lunch with your colleague in the office atmosphere, or maybe sharing washrooms, or coughing and sneezing also. So these are not the ways how HIV can spread. So these are few basic myths about HIV and AIDS. Moving on to the next. Now that we have discussed few facts and myths regarding transmission, let's discuss discrimination specifically. So when you hear about discrimination in the workplace due to HIV or AIDS, what situations can you think of? You can give certain scenarios or any discrimination that comes to your mind. Please use the chat box to respond. Any kind of discrimination that you can think of. Yes, so Shrimoy says that any colleagues who are ignoring HIV positive person, so this is a kind of stigma or discrimination. But anything specific example anybody can mention? Yes. Nikita says it is related to the jobs or task opportunities. Yes. Anything else? Misbehaving. Yeah, fine. Any more? Yeah, great. Like, when colleagues are reluctant to use the same washroom or facilities or resources with the HIV positive co-workers. So great. So the discrimination can be exactly anything. It can be physical, it can be mental, social, financial, emotional, it can be anything. So the act basically, it states about how someone who is terminated on the basis of the HIV status, or if you're denying someone promotion or denying any employment opportunities, that is a kind of discrimination. Another thing is, as mentioned by in the chat box, any unfair treatment or harassment is there, or maybe if I'm an employee and I'm sharing my HIV status with my manager and she goes or he goes and shares around with other colleagues. So that is also breach of confidentiality or breach of privacy because it is a very sensitive information that I shared with my manager. Or if during onboarding of an employee, you are asking the employee to do a forced medical testing or to disclose the HIV test results, that is also a form of discrimination. Or if even if you're excluding the HIV positive person from any benefits or health insurance, etc. This is also a kind of discrimination. So I basically mentioned examples of discrimination, different kinds of discrimination. Now that we have discussed the different kinds of discrimination related to HIV positive people, let's watch a video clip.
Anil is a new employee at ABC Enterprises. His first few weeks were going well as he was making new friends and enjoying his work. A month later, when he informs his colleagues that he lives with a roommate who is HIV positive, things begin to change. After learning about his roommate's condition, they start speaking to him less, moving away when he enters a room and maintaining physical distance from him. When Anil walks into the lunchroom, all his colleagues go back to their desks saying they have finished their lunch. Even his teammates started having fewer meetings so that they don't have to spend time around him. Anil starts to get depressed and begins dreading work.
So this is one of the videos which shows the kind of discrimination that person Anil or employee Anil faces at his workplace. Now, let us see in our next slide what exactly the law speaks about the discrimination and stigma that is faced by the employees who are HIV positive. So what exactly does the law say? Moving on to our next slide, I'll give you a very brief background about the journey of HIV or AIDS law. Basically the drafting of the law started back in 2003, and the law was enacted to stop the spread of HIV and AIDS and also to uphold the rights of the people who are affected by it. Even if it was enacted back in 2003, it was only in 2017 that the law got the presidential assent. And the 2017 Act, it was all about fighting against the stigma and the discrimination that is faced by people or employees who are HIV positive. And also it promotes accessibility and establishes a very good grievance redressal system. Only after 2017, based on the 2017 Act, on 2022, and another model policy was developed, and that was called the Model Policy of 2022, and it was related to establishments. The motive or the objective of this policy in 2022 was to promote the awareness and also promote safe workplaces, where there is no discrimination and no stigma against people who are facing any form of discrimination. So this was a very brief background of the law. It all started in 2003, but it took the shape of a law in 2017. It was finally enacted only in 2018, and post that in 2022, we have another model policy based on this. But even if we are in 2024, we must be seeing that there is very less awareness about this law. So let's see what exactly does the law say, and what some important highlights of the law. moving on to our next slide, I'll discuss few of the important highlights of the law. So the first and foremost thing is, if your organization or establishment has more than 100 employees, then any company with more than 100 employees, it is mandatory to have a complaints officer. So this is very much required where most of the organizations are lacking awareness. The second thing and the most important thing is no discrimination. No discrimination here means the HIV positive patients, they cannot be denied employment. For example, the HR is onboarding a person and I'm an employee, and the HR basically while onboarding me, just because I revealed my HIV status, the HR can't deny me employment. Or if I'm already an employee in an organization, promotion cannot be denied to me just on the basis of my HIV status. Just because I'm HIV positive, any form of discrimination related to work should not be there. The third thing is related to reasonable accommodation. So anybody of you, can you mention like what exactly is reasonable accommodation? Please feel free to use the chat box. Any idea about what reasonable accommodation is all about? Any idea? It can be any vague idea also, it's fine.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I just joined late.
Yeah, so my question is, what exactly is reasonable accommodation? Any idea what reasonable accommodation is all about? We are basically actually discussing the highlights of the law related to HIV and AIDS. So any idea what exactly is reasonable? Yeah, so Ruchira mentions that arrangements for better work life of HIV positive person. Great. Any other response?
Is it about creating when you say accommodation is not related to like the physical, but no, where the employee feels welcome in the organization, there's no stigma about HIV, AIDS, and no one like how the posh policy is there in case no someone is being they discriminate the person because the person has HIV or AIDS, whether there is an accommodation for the person to go talk about the person or have some sort of say uh, to come and have a safe space for them to come and talk about. Is that you mean by accommodation?
Yeah, so reasonable accommodation can be anything. It can be physical, social, emotional, anything. So basically, you are providing any flexible arrangement to the HIV positive person so that the person can work properly. For example, if I'm HIV positive and my immune system is really weak and I can't, maybe work to the first floor of the organization. So maybe reasonable accommodation can be by providing you flexible arrangements like having a work-life balance of maybe hybrid culture. 2 days I can go to office and the rest 3 days I can work from home. Or maybe they can have a safe space for me in the ground floor itself where I can work. So any form of flexible arrangement by the employer so that the employee can work properly. And it's easier for the HIV positive employee to work. That is what reasonable accommodation is all about. Next, the law also talks about informed consent. So informed consent is about, before conducting any HIV test or any treatment or any research, a consent should be taken from the HIV positive person. So that is what an informed consent is all about. The Act focuses a lot on the consent of the HIV positive person. Next is the confidentiality part. It is all about maintaining the privacy and the secrecy of the sensitive information. For example, previously I mentioned that if I'm mentioning it to my manager or HR that I'm HIV positive, it is the responsibility of my employer or my HR or manager to protect this sensitive information and not leak it to the colleagues or outside. So that confidentiality is very much important. Else action can be taken against this employer or HR or manager who is leaking this information. So maintaining the confidentiality is very important. Last but not the least, it is about maintaining a safe work environment. Safe work environment, it is a general thing like the HIV positive person should be given like space to communicate, to have an open communication, and should be treated with respect and dignity. So these are the main highlights of the law. Now that we have discussed the main highlights of the law, we will discuss our next topic now on confidentiality. So let's play a video clip here and we'll try to understand the importance of confidentiality.
Anita is an employee at XYZ Technologies and has been working at the organization for over 5 years. A few weeks ago, she informed her reporting manager that she will be late since she needs to get an urgent test for HIV done. When she reaches work, she notices a few of her colleagues whispering secretively around her. A while later, one of her colleagues, Smita, approaches Anita and asks if she is HIV positive. Anita is shocked since she did not mention this information to anyone except her manager. When she asks Smita how she got to know about this, Smita says that Anita's manager told the team that Anita was getting an HIV test done and that they should all be careful around her.
So, any observation about the video clip that we just watched? Like, what did we learn from this video clip? Please use your chat box to reply. Yeah, breach of confidentiality. Anything else? Yeah, confidentiality was broken. Insensitivity, yeah. The manager should not have disclosed the info. Yes. So what we were trying to show from the video basically is that a very confidential and sensitive information was shared by the HIV positive employee to the manager, but it was disclosed. So the act also speaks about the penalties that can be given in such kind of scenario. So being aware of that this is a wrong thing to do and this is an illegal thing to do is important. Moving on to our next topic, which we will discover in our next slide, is informed consent. So, informed consent, as I mentioned earlier, for example, if you're taking any test or anything regarding, for example, like I'm giving you a scenario basically in a workplace. For example, there is a health screening taking place, and your company is providing you with a wellness program basically, and they have all the provisions like eye testing and full body checkup, and they also have included the HIV test also as a part of this company's wellness program. Now, an employee, for example, I'm the employee and I want to take this test. So, when it comes to informed consent here, the main thing that needs to be done is the test is being conducted. I will be given a form basically where all the risks and the benefits of this test will be provided. A clear and a very clear and crisp explanation of the test will be given. Also, this test cannot be mandatory. This test, as in, I'm not talking about the eye test or the general body checkup. I'm talking about the HIV test. The HIV test is supposed to be completely voluntarily. It can't be it can't be mandated. Also, in the consent form, there should be an assurance of confidentiality. And even if I've given it, like my information won't be shared with anybody. Also, if I have given my consent, first of all, maybe I decided, okay, let me take the test. But then I decide I'm confused and I don't want to go through the test. Then I also have a right to refuse or withdraw the consent. So this is what informed consent is all about. So whenever any HIV test, or maybe another example I can give is maybe interns are coming to intern in my organization and they want to do some research on maybe HIV law or some medical negligence cases they want to talk about, or some research related to HIV and health. Even then, and some employees are there who are already HIV positive, me being one. So here also my informed consent or my consent should be taken before any kind of research is being done. So it just means to say, I just mean to say that the law is very clear that this is a very sensitive and confidential information, and without the informed consent, this testing or this medical research or normal research also should not be done. So this is what informed consent is all about. Now that we have discussed few important topics like confidentiality, informed consent, and the different types of discrimination, let us now see we should know, right? If, for example, we know that there is a POSH policy, and if there is some sexual harassment at workplace, I know whom to go to. Like I know the IC committee is there, and maybe we are very clear, and there's a lot of awareness towards it. But when it comes to HIV law, the awareness is still very, it's not very clear. So if I'm an HIV positive employee and some there, then I need to know how to file a complaint. So we will discuss now how to file a complaint basically. So the forum should be clear. Like we should know where exactly we can file the complaint. So as mentioned earlier in the highlights of the law, uh, basically it should be like if your organization has more than 100 employees, so there should be a complaints officer. So where can we file the complaint? We should go to the complaints officer and file the complaint of stigma or discrimination that we have faced. So that is the first recourse. Or you can also at a state level there is an ombudsman, so you can go to the ombudsman and file the complaint. So this is how you can go. Second thing, how do you file the complaint? So there are different means. It can be, if I'm not comfortable discussing or disclosing my HIV status, I can complain by writing a letter, and via post I can send it. I can also write an email. I can also do a telephone and any electronic form. So these are the different modes of filing the complaint. The third is when you're writing a complaint, what exactly does the complaint need to include? It should have all the details of the incident. For example, today is 22nd of August. On which date the stigma or discrimination took place? Who did the discrimination? At which place, like workplace, which place, date, and all the details about the person who has inflicted the discrimination, basically. So all these details needs to go into this complaint. Now, the law is also very clear, like the POSH law is clear about there is a timeline, right? Like till when can you file the complaint? So HIV law also states that within 3 months of the from the date of incident, one can file a complaint. However, some flexibility has been provided, and the complaint officer has the power. Like in case of POSH, the presiding officer has the power. In when it comes to HIV, the complaints officer has the power to extend the timeline if they know that there is some satisfactory reason or justifiable reason why the complaint could not be filed within the 3 months of timeline. So the complaint officer may extend the timeline if there is any justifiable reason. Also, if I'm not, if I'm a positive who has HIV positive, if I'm an employee who is HIV positive, and I'm not clear about the filing process, it is the responsibility of the complaints officer to help me and provide all the support and resources in filing the complaint. So this is how the process of complaint will look like. Going forward in our next slide. Yeah, Nikita, so we question, what if there are slightly less than 100 employees in the company? Okay, so the law, Nikita, the law is silent regarding this. The law clearly mentions that if more than 100 employees, then it is mandatory, but law is completely silent. Below 100 employees, it is not talking about anything. But being a lawyer, I would say as a matter of best practice, all organizations should have it. It's just like POSH. Now, Supreme Court also comes up with guidelines and all. So as a matter of good practice, even if your organization has less than 100 employees, it should be there. HIV committee and policy should be there. Now that we have spoken from the perspective of a person who has filed a complaint. So so Shambhavi has a question: how the employee will know how to file the complaint? What organization can do to help? So Shambhavi, that is what we discussed, right? Like how to file the complaint, as in this was the process that we discussed. There should be a complaints officer in your organization. You should go to that person, the complaints officer, have all the details given there, your date, place, incident, who did the discrimination, the modes of the act is also very clear about the modes of making the complaint, and you have a time frame, right? Within the 3 months you can go and file the complaint to the complaints officer. So the act talks about all these things. So as we discussed now from an employee's perspective who is HIV positive, now let us see the side from the employee's perspective. In a next slide we will talk about the grievance redressal mechanism. So here I have already filed a complaint now. My job is done. Some discrimination was done against me. I'm HIV positive. Now, what will you do when it comes to, what is the process to follow when it comes to grievance redressal? The first and foremost thing to do is to acknowledge that it is the duty and responsibility of the complaints officer to acknowledge and accept that a complaint has, for example, some crime has occurred. I go to the police station and file an FIR. I'll be given a receipt, right? That we acknowledge your complaint. The same way, the complaints officer needs to acknowledge that a discrimination has taken place and a unique complaint number. It's just like a Aadhaar number or different kinds of number we have, right? A unique complaint number and a receipt will be given to the this person who is discriminated against. For example, I'm filing the complaint, so I will be given that unique complaint number. The second step is to record everything in detail. So note down all the details like the time of the complaint and what actions were taken, like what the details of the incident. So everything should be in written form, be it in email, be it in paper, anything, but it should be recorded in writing. The third is to instruct. So now, if the complaint officer is sure that some vile discrimination has taken place, then the complaints officer will instruct the company to take some action against it. Now, number four is what action should be taken. So, for example, I'm Ipsita and my colleagues is Mr. X. Mr. X has discriminated against me. So now it is the job of the complaints officer to give a sensitivity training to Mr. X. Sensitivity training, as in awareness programs, can be there to make them aware, like, the facts and myths that we talked about HIV, how it spreads, how it doesn't spread, or maybe, ask the person to intern in an NGO which deals with HIV/AIDS specifically. So, and counsel the violator, that is Mr. X. So there's a few recommendations which has been stated in the act itself. The law itself states this is how an action should be taken. The next is the reporting thing. Whatever, like, we submit an annual report when it comes to POSH, right? Same goes for HIV also. It mandates that a reporting needs to be done, like the details of the complaints received in the last 6 months, and you have to the appropriate government, you have to submit that report. Last thing, for example, I'm the person who has been discriminated against, and I'm not happy with the redressal process that the complaint officer gave. I'm very dissatisfied with the result or action taken. So I have an option of appealing also. So if the victim is not satisfied, then they can approach the ombudsman at the state level. Or even if you're not happy with the state level, any other legal action also you can take. Any other legal recourse you can take. So this is what the law states about the grievance redressal process, like how action is, how acknowledgement or recording, instruction, taking action, filing reports, and appeal. This is how the grievance redressal process looks like. Now, moving on to a next slide, we will talk few do's and don'ts for the employer, basically. Like, if it is your company, what you should be doing as a matter of best practice. First and foremost, we need to see, as mentioned earlier, that there should be no discrimination. It is a job of the HR to see that while onboarding, there is no discrimination just on the basis of HIV status. If I reveal my status that I'm HIV positive, it is illegal if the HR is denying me job. Action can be taken against HR. Same goes for any promotion is there. I cannot be denied promotion. My manager can't say that, okay, she's HIV positive. She might not be able to do her work properly. She might take frequent leaves. So I cannot be denied promotion on that basis also. There are several case laws which discusses these cases, both High Court and Supreme Court. The second thing as an employer needs to do is, if you are having more than 100 employees, then a complaints officer should be appointed. So this is mandated. As discussed, like if below 100 are there, it is not mandatory, but as a matter of good practice, it should be there. But above 100, organization needs to have. I'd also like to mention one thing. For corporates, it is 100. But if there is a healthcare institution, then 20 members also if are there, then they need to have a complaints officer. So for corporates and private and public sector, 100 is the number. But for healthcare institutions or nursing homes where or pharmacy where like 20 people are there, even then for healthcare institutions, it is 20 is the number. Now, as discussed, like it is a very sensitive and private matter, right, regarding the status of HIV. So the employer needs to adopt data protection measures to protect the confidentiality and safeguard all the sensitive HIV-related information of employees, basically. So this is very important to have such data protection measures. Also, as mentioned, while onboarding an employee, you cannot ask for an HIV test. That is illegal. That cannot be done. Also, we should provide all the reasonable accommodation like flexible work arrangements for the HIV positive employees. And any form of test you're doing or any research or anything which you're doing, then an informed consent is very, very important. So there's a few do's and don'ts for the employer. Now we will move on to our next slide and we will see how to protect. We'll see a video clip how to protect confidentiality.
It is crucial for a company's management and complaints officer to maintain confidentiality about a person's HIV status. Even if a person wants to file a complaint, they can request the complaints officer to protect their identity. To do so, the standard procedure is Prepare a document with the complainant's name, address, and other identifying details and keep it in a sealed envelope safely. Use pseudonyms for the protected person in all other mentions of them regarding the complaint. As per the HIV and AIDS policy, it is also mandatory for any organization keeping records of HIV-related information to adopt measures to protect such sensitive data. Data protection measures include protection from disclosing sensitive data, procedures for accessing information, security systems to protect the information, and other mechanisms to ensure everyone's accountability. To this end, the following steps must be taken to ensure complete data protection. Only authorized persons or staff who have signed an undertaking to maintain confidentiality of information must collect HIV-related information. Access to HIV-related information must only be granted to such authorized persons or staff. HIV reports should be secured in almirahs or cabinets that are locked and secure. Ensure that personal computers, mobiles, tablets, or any other hardware are password protected and should be logged off or locked when left unattended. There should be a data management committee within the organization which will be responsible to review and provide appropriate recommendations regarding the data security measures taken in the establishment. If there is no such committee, the head of the organization will perform the roles and responsibilities of the committee. There should be standard operating procedures for discarding physical and electronic records or files containing HIV-related information.
Okay, so now we just saw in this video how to protect confidentiality, and those were certain very practical steps that any organization can take. Now, moving on to the next slide, we will discuss few of the roles of or roles and responsibilities of a co-worker or a colleague, basically. So, for example, when we are going to workplace and I'm sitting with my colleague who just sits beside me, and I'm aware that my colleague is HIV positive. So what should be my roles and responsibilities here? Like, anybody like suggest something? Like, you can use the chat box to reply. Like, what should be your role as a co-worker if you know that your colleague is basically HIV positive? So we have a few like 4 to 5 pointers here on the slide. First is to acknowledge yes. So Uma says not to tell others without consent. That is true, like to protect the confidentiality. The first and foremost thing is sometimes what happens is we should be aware and accept the fact that our colleague is HIV positive and give all the support and resources that is required. So acknowledging the fact that your colleague is HIV positive is very important. For that, a basic awareness is very much required, to be aware, like what are the modes of transmission, how I can contract HIV. For that, the strong awareness is very important. We should also acknowledge that there is discrimination, and also try to make the colleague understand that it is not acceptable. We should try to offer all the support that you are there for them. Obviously, the workplace culture matters a lot. So that support and offering all form of resources is very important, that they are not alone and they belong to this workplace. Third and most important thing is to encourage them. If there is any form of discrimination, we should encourage our colleagues or co-workers to file a complaint, basically. Also, at the same time, if they're not comfortable filing a complaint, we should respect their decision that they don't want to disclose their identity, and it is not mandatory for them to disclose. So that decision also should be respected. Last but not the least, as Uma mentioned, that maintaining the confidentiality to understand that it is a very private matter and it is confidential information which is sensitive. So we should maintain the confidentiality and not leak about or not banter or gossip about this. So this is what the role of a co-worker can be. Any other pointers that you can think of what the role of a co-worker can be? Apart from this 4 that we discussed, you can please use your chat box for replying. Any other thing, anything else? As a co-worker, what should our roles and responsibilities should be if we get to know that our colleague is HIV positive? True, not to create any hostile environment. Aman says just that certain best channels for the mental counseling. This is very important point. Like, we never know what the person is going through, right? Whether they're giving, whether they're able to give their best in the workplace. So having certain counseling sessions for them in the workplace, that is a very good idea. Anything else? Yeah, so overall, this is what a role of a coworker can be. But there can be by discussions, and there can be many other best practices also how a colleague or coworker should like function in this kind of an atmosphere. Moving forward to a next slide, are certain recommendations basically, like what is the way forward like. The first and foremost thing to comply with this workplace compliance, this law basically, what we need to have is an HIV and AIDS policy. And we have different policies at our workplace, like data security or maybe ESG policy or POSH policy. So then, same way, we need to have an HIV policy, and it should be placed in such a place where people should be able to see it. It should be in such a language, English and any other language, where the majority of the employees can see it. It should be displayed at conspicuous places at the office. So that is the first and foremost thing that we could have. The second thing is, like we have a POSH committee, ICC, the same way we need to have an HIV/AIDS committee, and we can rename it in any other form also. But HIV/AIDS committee is the general term that we have. And if you have more than 100 employees, then we should appoint a complaints officer. And as discussed earlier, even if we don't have 100 employees, below that also, as a matter of good practice, we need to have a complaints officer in the HIV/AIDS committee. Third thing is, just having a committee doesn't make sense. It needs to be implemented, right? It should be in the running stage. Like if I'm going to complain, then some redressal process should be there. So that effective grievance redressal mechanism is very, very important. So how some platform should be there, like how and where should I go and raise the complaint? Also, how many complaints are being resolved? So that efficient complaint redressal process should be there. Apart from that, regular training awareness, sensitivity trainings to all the employees should be there. What exactly is HIV? Because if you realized when we started the webinar, many of us were not, in fact, aware the exact difference between HIV and AIDS. Both are different. AIDS is a disease, HIV is just a virus. So basic awareness training and sensitivity training, how you need to act or behave with a person or a colleague who is HIV positive. Those all awareness should be there. Those empathetic feeling should be there, so that the person who is HIV positive should feel as a part of the organization. That workplace culture needs to be very good. For that, awareness training regarding HIV and AIDS is very important. Last, we need to support and give all form of resources, be it emotional support or like flexible work arrangements should be provided to the HIV positive employees. Now, moving on to the next slide, this is just a screenshot of the HIV/AIDS workplace policy of Indigo. So Indigo they have selected Indigo because it is very relatable. So Indigo has a very great HIV/AIDS workplace policy. It would be great if after this webinar, you can just go on their website and check how the policy is made, and how Indigo is an equal opportunity employer and provides a set of guidelines so that there is no discrimination and there is a safe working atmosphere for people who are HIV positive. Now, moving on to the next slide, it's basically the videos that you saw in this webinar today. It is a part of Lawcubator itself. Now, how can Lawcubator help you in this, basically regarding this webinar that we had? So first is the policy drafting. We can help you starting from the scratch to draft this policy. If you already have a draft, we can help you review this policy draft of the HIV and AIDS policy. Second thing is, we already have educational videos, which are this e-learning courses, both for employees and employers, that is management and employees both. So we have educational courses and videos for e-learning courses for both. We also have provisions of webinars and live training. Regarding the complaint process, how to file a complaint, the grievance redressal process, we will have automated complaint redressal process also. Also, as we discussed, and it is also mandated in the act, like how you should have posters or displays in your notice board and in different parts of the organization or workplace. So we can also help you create customized posters related to HIV and AIDS law in your workplace and any other general consultation also. So the videos that you watched during this webinar, it is a part of our e-learning courses itself. And so this is the end of the webinar. Do you have any other questions that you'd like me to resolve? Please feel free to use the chat box and I'd be glad to answer them. Any other questions regarding HIV AIDS law? So I guess this is the end of the webinar. I hope you had some insights regarding the law.
Ikshita,
Yeah.
I was just typing the message. Then
Yeah,
that,
please tell
so
me. Yeah.
no, so I have a query. See, like how for posh, like how for posh is this, right? If there is a
Yeah.
female employee, we have to include the posh policy in the office. So
Yeah.
my question is like this for HIV, this policy, does the policy have to be implemented if there is a person or respective there is not, we have to introduce a policy to the office?
No, that's what I mentioned, like time and again in the webinar. Like if you have 100 employees, see, HIV is a very private and sensitive information, right? We don't know if the person is disclosing or not. So irrespective of the fact that
Okay.
you're aware that the person is HIV positive, hai ya nahi, irrespective of the fact, if there are more than 100 employees, you should have a policy. Below that, there is no mandate, but it is a good practice to have.
Okay, and I have a query on this complaints officer.
Yeah.
I mean, like I am part of the POSH ICA committee.
Yeah.
So essentially, I was in between. I couldn't hear. So who do we appoint as a complaints officer? Someone intern within the office, or that part I couldn't hear.
No, it can be anyone. The law is silent who the credentials or the qualifications of the complaints officer is not mentioned. So it can be anybody from the organization. Like POSH has certain criteria, right? Like this many years of social work or law should be done. But there is no certain credentials or qualifications for a criteria for a complaints officer when it comes to HIV/AIDS. It can be anyone from inside the organization.
And the complaints officer can be a male or a female,
Yes,
irrespective like how we have for POSH.
Yes, irrespective of the gender.
Okay. So just one question, can a person from the POSH member itself be like that, or is it like the POSH member cannot be a complaints officer?
No, the law is silent regarding it. So a person from the POSH committee also, ICC also can be a part of this. There is no restriction regarding that.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Any other questions that we need to discuss? Okay, so I think we are towards the end of the webinar today. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. I hope all of us got certain insights regarding the law. And yeah, so you can contact Lawcubator for all the services that we provide regarding this. Thank you everyone for being a part of this webinar.